Section 5.1, we're going to start talking about perpendicular and angle bisectors. But before we can talk about those, we need to understand what those three individual words mean. Okay? What did you guys come up with for perpendicular? Anyone want to share? What does it mean? What'd you say? Right. So two lines intersect. I highly recommend you write this down. Two lines intersect and form what kind of angle? A right angle. Okay. What do we know about right angles? They're 90 degrees. Okay. Symbol for that. Show me with your hands or your arms what a perpendicular symbol looks like. It's the upside down T, right? This is a perpendicular symbol. Sometimes they will have that right angle drawn in for you. Okay. So perpendicular means two lines that intersect and form a right angle. Good. What does angle mean? It's like degrees that opens up. Okay, I'm going to put two lines that meet at a corner. Show me with your arms what an angle looks like. Right, if you put your wrists together, you put your elbows together. Okay, that right there is an angle. This here. Okay, what does bisector mean? What'd you say? Splits it in half. Yep, it is a line that intersects an angle or line and splits it in half. What does split in half mean? What's a different way I can say split in half? Separate how? Like two equal parts. Yep. So, a bisector is a line that intersects an angle or a line and splits it in half or into two equal parts. Okay? So, knowing those three words, today we're going to talk about a perpendicular bisector and an angle bisector. Okay? First one we're going to talk about is a perpendicular bisector. Perpendicular bisector. Again, perpendicular means what? Creates a right angle, right? What does bisector mean? Splits it in half. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to start with a line. I'm going to call this line AB. Okay. I'm going to have a perpendicular bisector XY. Okay, off to the side, I want you to write XY is a perpendicular bisector of AB. Now, let's break this apart. Perpendicular, again, what does that tell us? Creates a 90-degree angle. Does everyone agree that that right there should be a 90-degree angle? Yes? What else do we know about the other side? It's also 90 degrees. Yep. So that's the perpendicular side of it. What does bisector mean? Splits it in half. What do you think is getting split in half? A and B. So what can I say about these two sides right here if they're split in half? They're equal, so we can put congruent symbols on those. Okay, so perpendicular bisector creates that 90-degree angle and it splits AB into two equal parts. Okay? That right there is called the perpendicular bisector theorem. Underline that on your example 2 up above. Perpendicular bisector theorem. Okay? If you see a right angle, okay, that is a perpendicular bisector. Okay? Then you can assume that those two parts are equal to each other if you see a perpendicular bisector. Okay? There's a converse of this. What does converse mean? It's like the opposite, okay? So if I draw these two lines from A to X and X to B, If this is a perpendicular bisector and we have these two equal parts, what do you think these two lines are? Those two lines are congruent to each other. The reason for that is they meet at the same point on the perpendicular bisector. Okay? You do not have to draw this again. Okay? Just a different example here. If I had this drawing, can those two lines be congruent to each other? Why not? They don't meet at the same point. Okay? So in order for these two lines to be congruent to each other, they have to meet at that same point on the perpendicular bisector. Okay? So with the perpendicular bisector, you can assume all of those things. Okay? The right angle is what's going to give it away for a perpendicular bisector. Okay? Way at the beginning of the year, I talked about theorems. Why should you like theorems? Why do they make it easy? They tell you specific information that you can assume, right? So the perpendicular bisector theorem tells you all of those things that you can assume when you see that right angle in there. Okay? Let's put it with an example. Go ahead and flip your notes to page 2. Okay? I will look at this specific example first. This one right here. Do we have a perpendicular bisector? How do you know? Like, what gives it away?
Right angle.
Right angle gives it away. Okay, so we have this perpendicular bisector right here. Okay, it already told us 11 and 11. Those are congruent sides. Okay. What can we assume about these two sides then? They're congruent. What is the reasoning for that? They meet at the same point on that perpendicular bisector. Good. So if I wanted to find the value of x, what do I need to do with these two equations? Set them equal to each other. Yep. So we're going to come down here. We have 6x minus 10 equals 3x plus 2. Little algebra review. Okay, algebra is going to come back. What do I do first? We want to get like terms on the same side. What did someone say? I heard minus 2. Okay, does it matter the way that you do this? No. Okay, so over here I have 6x minus 12 equals 3x. What's next? Yep, two-step algebra. So I have negative 12 equals negative 3x. Last step. Divide by negative 3. X equals 4. Okay. If I wanted to know the value of AD here, what do? I would plug in 4, right? When I plug that in, does it turn into this? No. Why not?
Because you need to times.
Right. This turns into multiplying. I see that sometimes. That's why I wanted to go over it. Okay. Remember, when you plug numbers in, it turns into multiplication. Okay. Go ahead and try number 6, A and B. So you know the perpendicular bisector theorem. Use that to solve A and B. What do you see in the picture on number 6A that helps you out? The right angle. So we know this is what right here? Perpendicular bisector. Okay, we know it's perpendicular. What does the bisector part tell us? Splits this line in half. So we know these two are equal to each other. How do I set up an equation? 5n minus 2 equals 2n plus 7. So then we solve. What do I do first? Subtract 7. Yep, it doesn't matter which way you do it. 5n minus 9 equals 2n. Two-step algebra. Subtract 5n. We have negative 9 equals negative 3n. Yep. So we have n equals 3. Is that the answer? No. What did it want us to find? Wants us to find wy, which is this length right here. How do we find that? Plug it in. So we have 2n plus 7. I plug 3 into n right there. So 2 times 3 plus 7. What's 2 times 3? 6 plus 7? 13. Does anyone want to explain B? Again, what is the one thing you know right now in this section? What's the theorem you know? Perpendicular bisector, okay? Do you see one right here? Okay? That means it splits this in half. So if this side's 14, what's this side? Also 14. So this whole length right here is 14. We want to know what this length right here is. Okay, well, what do you see on the bottom again? Another perpendicular bisector. What does that do? Splits in half. So what's half of 14? 7. Good. Okay, so angle bisector. What do you think angle bisector means? Cuts an angle in half, exactly. Okay, so if I have angle here, I'm going to name it A, B, and C. I have angle A, B, C. Okay. Bisector splits this angle in half. I'm going to call this B, D. Okay. What just happened to the angle? Got split in half, so what do we know about the two parts? They're equal. Okay, so we can assume those two angles are congruent to each other. Okay? A converse of that, what we can assume is if I draw two lines here and here, what do we know about those two lines? Yep, why are those congruent? They meet at the same point. It's the exact same reason as to why they were congruent on the perpendicular bisector theorem. Okay? So, if we know these two angles are congruent to each other, we can assume that these two sides are congruent to each other. Okay? Converse of that, if we know that these two angles are congruent to each other, we can assume those two angles are congruent to each other. Okay? So if you know one, you can assume the other. Does that make sense? Okay? In a lot of your pictures, they are going to have this right angle right there. Okay? Don't worry about the right angle. They just have it in the picture. Okay? So, angle bisector splits the angle in half, and these two lines are congruent because they are attached at the same point. Okay? So, perpendicular bisector and angle bisector, are you seeing the relationships? Okay? Perpendicular bisector deals with lines. Angle bisector deals with the angles. Okay? We see this word a lot. What does that word mean? Equidistant. What two words make up that word? Equal and distant. That's the definition right there. Okay? It means they have equal distance. I would write that down. Equidistant means two things have equal distance. So for example, if it said AB is equidistant to CD, what does that mean? They have the same distance. Yep. Okay, so we're going to see that word a lot. Just remember, it is exactly how it sounds. The definition comes from the words. It's equal distance. Okay? All right, real quick, I want to look at this example that I have up here. Okay? Talking about applying the angle bisector theorem. Is this an angle bisector? How do we know? The angles are congruent. So what else can we assume? Right, then we can assume these two lines are congruent. So if we wanted to find the value of x, how would we set that up? 2x plus 3 equals 4x minus L. I'm 11. I'm not going to go over how to solve that because I feel like we're good. Are we good? Okay. Once I got the value of x, what would I do with it to find the value of KL? Plug it in. Does it really matter which one you plug it into? No. Why not? They should be the same. Yep. Good. And nice job. HI. Whenever they give you information, I want you to fill it in. So HI is 7. IJ is 7. And HGI, remember that's this angle right here, is 25. It wants to know what this angle is here. Okay? Is this an angle bisector?
Yeah.
How do you know?
Because it splits it in half. and then it's equal. The
Right.
up top,
Since these two are equal, we can assume what?
that the angle's gonna be equal.
That the angles are equal also. So if this angle is 25, what's the other one? It's also 25. So A, you should get 25. Good. On B, it says HGJ. Is that the whole thing or half? It's the whole thing. So this whole thing right here is 57. IGJ, this one right here, is 28.5. And then it says HI is 12.2. It wants to find the value of IJ. What are we thinking? So first ask yourself, is this line an angle bisector? Why do you say yes?
Because 28.5 is 28.5 equals 57.
Right, 28.5 is half of 57. So we know that this side is also 28.5. Since those two angles are equal to each other, what do we know about these two sides? They're congruent to each other. So if this side's 12.2, what's this side? Also 12.2. Good. Look at the back page of your notes. I want to look at number 2. How can you determine if a point is equidistant from the sides of an angle? What does equidistant mean? Same distance, equal distance, okay? How can you determine if they are equal distance from the sides of an angle?
If the sides are equal.
Other one. They're trying to determine if the sides are equal. So if the angles are equal, then the sides are equal, okay? But what do those sides have to meet at?
The same point.
They have to meet at the same point. Yep. So if the angles are equal and they meet at the same point, then that is true. Okay? That is number 2. All right. Whenever a problem gives you information, what should you do with that information? Fill it in to the picture, right? JL is 14. KL is 10. And ML is 7. Are we working with a perpendicular bisector or an angle bisector? Perpendicular. Okay, do we agree this is a perpendicular bisector? How do we know? Has a right angle, and how do we know it's a bisector? It splits in half, right? Well, if this side's 7, what's the other side? Good. How do I find this? Or what's the reasoning?
KL is equal to JK.
Right. These two, I heard someone say it, these two meet at equal points. So if this is 10, this side is also 10. Good. On 6 and 7, are we working with an angle bisector or perpendicular bisector? Angle bisector. So it says ZWY or XWY is congruent to ZWY. And XY is 4. It wants to know what YZ is. Why is it 4? Why can we assume those two lines right there are congruent to each other? They meet at the same point and the angles are congruent. So if the angles are congruent and they meet at the same point, then we can assume those two lines are congruent to each other. Okay? Number 7 tells us XY is congruent to ZY and ZWY is 18. What is XWZ? What do you think?
36.
How'd you get that?
XY and ZY are equal, so then the angles would be equal. So
Correct.
add the angles.
Correct, yep. Since these two lines are the same, we can assume that these two angles are going to be the same. But the question wants this whole angle, so how do we figure that out? Yep, 18 plus 18 is 36. Good. All right, this last one here. It wants us to write an algebraic expression for the area of the picture frame. Okay, well, what do you notice is in the picture? Not in the picture.
What?
This whole picture. What do we have at the top? What it's hanging by? What do they draw for you?
X minus 2 inches.
Right, and what's this? Perpendicular bisector. So we have that right angle. What else do we know about a perpendicular bisector? Yep, these two sides are equal to each other. Well, what does this side equal? X minus 2, so this side's going to equal x minus 2. In order to find the area, what do we need to know about a square? We need to know two sides, right? Can we figure out what this side is?
Yeah.
How do we figure that out?
X minus 2 equals x minus 2.
Not equals. Right. Why do we want to add them together? Correct. So x plus x is 2x, negative 2 minus 2, negative 4. So if I draw this, what do I know about the sides of a square? They're all equal. So if that side is 2x minus 4, so is this side. How do I find the area of a square? Length times width. So I would take 2x minus 4 times 2x minus 4. We're not going to solve it, but how would I solve this? How would I multiply this? What's the strategy you use?
Oh, I forgot what it's called, but like you use times. Yeah,
Distributing, some of you call it FOIL. Okay. What is a different way I can write this to condense it? What does condense mean? Shorten it. How can I shorten it?
2x minus 1 to the second power.
Yep. 2x minus 4 to the second power. That's what that one was looking for. Good.